Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Bakugo Had a Twin Part 1. If you guys enjoy this What If and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story DysFunctionalAF from AO3. So let's start the video. Useless Quirk. Chapter text. The door to the family home slammed open, revealing a spiky-haired blonde boy behind it with his leg up as he'd kicked the door open. Dressed in a school uniform, he hoisted the bag higher onto his shoulder and walked inside, a snarl on his face. "Mom's pissed. We've been waiting for you to arrive for dinner," a girl said, lounging on the brown leather couch of the living room. "And I hope you didn't break the door again." "I didn't." "Shut up," the boy yelled with a raspy voice and slammed the door shut. His sister sat up straight, smiling at him with amusement. They both looked nearly identical since they were twins. Their facial features were sharp and defined, with pale and smooth skin. Their hair was the same color, a sandy blonde, although the girl's was a shade lighter, and they spiked in the same way. Their deep-set eyes were a fiery blood red. "Don't look at me like that. It's condescending," he yelled and dropped his school bag on the floor after kicking his shoes off. Before she could reply, an angry woman's voice sounded from the kitchen. "Katsuki! Stop yelling!" Katsuki glared towards the kitchen. His twin jumped to her feet and gently hit his arm. "What's got you in such a mood this time?" she wondered, having always been the more reasonable and mild-tempered twin. She assumed she'd gotten it from her father. "I don't want to talk about it," he growled in a low voice, avoiding her questioning gaze. "Katsuki, dinner's ready. What the hell are you waiting for?" their mother demanded as she stomped into the living room, oven mitts on her hands. She had the same spiky blonde hair and red eyes, though with a rounder face than her children. "We're coming, woman." Katsuki exploded. Their mother's eyes lit up with angry rage at being spoken to so rudely. Her son opened his mouth again to continue yelling at her, but Kaya subtly let her fingers touch the back of his forearm, hoping their mother wouldn't notice. Katsuki's rage melted out of him instantly and he lowered his head in an apologetic bow. "I'm sorry I came home late. I got held up at school. I can't wait to taste the dinner you've prepared for us. I'm starving," Katsuki said after looking back up. Their mother squinted at her son, mulling over if he deserved to get yelled at some more. She glanced at her daughter, who was smiling softly, tight-lipped and hopeful all would blow over. She nodded to herself and turned back towards the kitchen. "Hurry! Your father's stomach has been grumbling for over an hour." The twins watched her leave. Katsuki blinked and pushed his sister away. In a hushed voice, he snarled, "Stop doing that, you damned demon. I hate feeling you in there." He slapped the side of his head, as if trying to hit the feeling away. "It's damn annoying." "Maybe, but it keeps you from getting into a brawl with her half the time," she said with a shrug. "I don't care," he hissed. "How would you like it if I used my quirk against you every second, huh?" He showed her his palms, setting off tiny explosions like miniature fireworks, a mischievous smirk stretching across his face. Kaya stepped closer, staring him right in the eyes. "Go on. Burn me." He glared, fury rising in him at the provocation, but the explosions stopped. With a roll of his eyes, he flicked her forehead and stomped off towards the kitchen. Kaya snickered, rubbing the aching spot between her eyebrows as she followed after him. During dinner, their father asked them all about their days, making conversation and congratulating them on whatever small accomplishments they'd managed to do. The kids had been at school all day, though in different classrooms. It had always been a great annoyance to them both, as they much preferred being together than apart. As they ate, the news played on a small television set up on a wall by the dining table. And much to everyone's surprise, Katsuki's face appeared on the screen. The news broadcaster explained that a giant sludge villain had captured the young student, using his quirk to activate Katsuki's explosions, creating quite the chaos. Heroes had come to the rescue, as well as All Might himself, the #1 hero. Footage also showed Katsuki's curly-haired classmate, Izuku running towards the villain in a useless attempt to save his childhood friend. Kaya frowned at that, as she knew her brother wasn't exactly nice with Deku. That was the insulting nickname Katsuki always used for him, which basically meant that Midoriya's a good-for-nothing loser. "So that's why you were late?" their father gasped. "Are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital?" "I'm fine," Katsuki yelled before shoving more rice in his mouth. He continued, his mouth full, "It was nothing. I didn't even need the hero's help. I was seconds away from freeing myself on my own." "Bullshit," their mother exclaimed and hit him on the head with her fork. "Let's not fight at the table, please," their father pleaded with a stressed smile on his sharp features. Those being the only thing the twins had inherited from him at birth. "Rice will fly everywhere again. It's a pain to clean up." The two hotheads kept on yelling at each other, looking about to start a wrestling match of sorts. Kaya patted her father's hand. "It's no use, Dad." "I know," he sighed in exasperation. Later that evening, Kaya sat at her desk, doing her homework and enjoying the calm of her bedroom. That was until her brother burst into her room and laid on her bed after closing the door behind him, without slamming it. He had more manners when it came to his sister's things. He stared at the ceiling in silence, his arms folded behind his head. He no longer wore his uniform, instead just some old t-shirt and gym shorts. Kaya knew he hadn't come to use her bed, he had his own, so she set down her pencil and turned her chair towards him. "I get why you were so pissed. Deku tried to save you. Must have been a hard hit to your oversized ego," she said in a light tone. "Shut up," he said, empty of the usual rage that accompanied the words. "What pisses me off is that he lives in some sort of crazy delusion that he can get into UA and become the #1 hero. Quirkless. It's insane. He's lost his mind. It's one thing to be a superhero fanboy, but he's taken it too far." She looked down at her hands, fiddling with her nails. Confused by her silence, Katsuki turned his head to look at her. "What?" he wondered. "I just think it's a crazy delusion, too, me getting into UA with you, with my useless quirk," she whispered. She'd only ever shared such vulnerable thoughts with her twin. He sat up, tossing his legs over the edge of the bed to stare her down properly. "Thinking like that is what's useless, you idiot. You can possess people, take over their consciousness and make them do whatever you want with a touch. How is that useless? Yeah, it's hard sometimes, and yeah, the fact that you're also in control of your own body at the same time is tough on your brain, but UA will teach you how to make it easier and stuff. You need to go there to get stronger. It's the best hero school there is. It's a useless quirk for a hero. No attack power. No defense, either. It's not even useful for scoping out locations. I can't be a hero," she insisted. It wasn't the first time they had a discussion about this. "Alone, yeah, you can't do much. That's why we'll always stick together," he argued, reaching out to grab her knees and pull her closer to him, the chair's wheels rolling towards the bed. "Smoothly. We'll be the greatest hero duo there ever was. And I'll be the #1 hero, with you by my side. But for that, you need to come to UA with me. I know you'll pass the theoretical exam. And then you'll pass the practical?" She opened her mouth to deny those claims, but he didn't give her the chance to speak. "Look, we have a few months before then. We'll train together. Our physical strength, our speed, our stamina. Even if your quirk can't be used for fighting, at least your body will be." "What did you say?" His small pupils raked her face, waiting for her to object. However, his determination to enter the school as a team and his willingness to help her warmed Kaya's heart too much for her to refuse. "But I'll try my best." "Thanks," she smiled softly. Katsuki nodded, satisfied, and got up to leave. Before opening the door, he turned back to look at her. "Hey, don't think I'm doing this for you. What would people think if my own twin didn't make it into UA?" He smirked teasingly. He was joking, and he only did that with Kaya. "It would reflect badly on me, you know." The door closed, and she started fiddling with her nails again. Anticipation filled her as she imagined potentially getting into the same school as Katsuki, but dread also weighed down her heart, worried about his reaction if she failed. The following months were tough on Kaya, both physically and mentally. Every day after school, she and Katsuki trained together, running, lifting weights, practicing close combat. But also their quirks. Hers drained her mentally, turning her brain to mush every time she used it too much, which had become every day. It had taken months for her parents and the family doctor to realize her quirk had awakened, and many more months after that to understand it. At first, it seemed she could only possess her twin brother, but they found that to be false after she managed to possess the doctor as well. The limitations were more in terms of her mental capacities, as controlling two bodies at the same time was extremely taxing for the brain. Although, possessing Katsuki came much more naturally and required less mental strain, since they were twins and had grown up together so closely. She was able to stay in control of his body for much longer periods than others. The theoretical exam hadn't been too difficult as they'd both studied, and much to Kaya's surprise, she'd managed to pass along with her brother. Izuku Midoriya also passed, which greatly infuriated Katsuki, but there was nothing he could do about it. And finally came the day for the official entrance exam. As Kaya walked side by side with her brother, she couldn't help but be awed by the giant building ahead of her, two tall towers covered in windows and connecting at the bottom, with an enormous blue archway before the double doors. The golden logo for the school was in the middle of the arch's top, a big U with an A in the empty space inside. "Stop gaping. You look lame," he hissed at her, hands in his pockets. "Stop slouching. You look lame," she retorted. A slow-walking boy was ahead of them, and he stopped in his tracks, seemingly lost in thought. The twins caught up in no time. "Out of my way, Deku," Katsuki called out with his usual glare. The boy turned around, his large round eyes looking over both of them. "Kaken. Kaya." She frowned at him. She remembered him being much skinnier and weak-looking, as she had seen him a few times in the past years. She'd seen a lot more of him when they were much younger, as he'd always been hanging around her twin. But then his nickname for her brother finally registered and she giggled. How could he call him like that still, after all these years of Katsuki bullying him? Knowing her brother, she knew this was a big reason why he got so annoyed with Izuku. "Don't stand in front of us. I'll kill you," Katsuki threatened without sparing him a glance. He stumbled out of their way, and once they were past him, Izuku stuttered out, "The morning, let's all do our best." They didn't answer him. Kaya grabbed onto her brother's arm and teased in a small voice, "Kaken, let's do our best." "Shut up," he exploded. She reverted to her normal voice. "I didn't know you two were such close friends, still. Besties? Shut up. I'll kill you too," he yelled, yet he didn't push her off of his arm. Once they were sitting in the auditorium, the voice hero, Present Mike, began to explain the entrance exam to all the potential students. Despite being scared of Katsuki, Izuku chose to sit beside him and kept fanboying under his breath at the sight of the pro hero. Katsuki had to tell him to shut it multiple times during the presentation. The students received exam tickets displaying their names, examination numbers, and the battle center in which they do the exam. It was to be a mock battle, where they would all be facing robots which were worth either 1, 2, or 3 points each. The exam takers with the highest amount of points after 10 minutes were to be accepted into the school. Katsuki examined the exam ticket card for a second and grumbled. "In other words, they won't let you work with your friends, huh?" "Why, you're right. Even though our examinee numbers are consecutive, we're assigned to different battle centers," Izuku said. As he tried to read over Katsuki's card, the perpetually angry boy moved it out of his sight. "Don't look. I'll kill you," he tooted in disappointment. "Damn it. Now I can't crush you." Izuku gasped and moved his upper body away. "What am I supposed to do?" Kaya whispered, distraught that she'd have to find a way to pass this exam without her brother's help. She stared at the capital 𝐶 on her card, knowing her twin hadn't. "I can't punch a robot to destroy it. I don't have superhuman strength. And I certainly can't take over a machine." "No, but you can possess other examinees," Katsuki whispered to her, a fierce look in his red eyes. "Take a minute or two to observe which ones would be useful to you, then follow them. Whatever points you scrape up using their quirks will be yours. You can pass that way." She took a deep breath, tightened the high ponytail on her head, and fixed her spiky bangs out of her eyes. "I can pass," she repeated. "I can't pass," Kaya whispered in despair, staring at the looming door ahead of her and at the other students assigned to Battle Center C. There was a tall guy with white hair and 6 arms who looked plenty strong enough to punch those robots to pieces, unlike her. A girl with pink skin and hair, her eyes black and yellow, glanced at her and smiled. Kaya had no clue what her quirk could be, but she seemed much too confident not to pass. A boy stood ahead of her, half of his head covered in white hair, and the other half was a dark red color. He didn't pay anyone attention, patiently waiting for the door to open. He seemed confident in his abilities as well, and she had half a mind to follow him and wait for an opportunity to possess him, but she was distracted by a loud boasting voice. "It'll be a piece of cake for me." A boy chuckled. He had yellow hair with a black stripe in the front, and was chatting up a petite girl. "I'm electric, just have to electrocute the things, short-circuit them, and bam! All the points are mine." Despite her nervousness, she felt a smirk pull at her lips and approached the guy. She tapped his shoulder. "Hi, did you just say you can electrocute things?" she asked him with a pleasant smile on her face. "I sure did," he exclaimed brightly, making little bolts of electricity dance along his fingers to prove his point. "Pretty neat, huh? I'm 𝗫𝗄𝐵𝗃𝗫. Nice to meet you." "You are?" "Katsuki Bakugo," she said. He grinned widely, and before he could add anything, Present Mix's voice echoed through the air. "Ok, start," the pro hero yelled, sending his voice over kilometers. No one moved, startled by the suddenness. "What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights." "Run, run." The doors had opened, so the group ran inside the arena. 𝗵𝗲 clapped Kaya's shoulder, shouting good luck, as he ran along with the others. Kaya also hurried to follow them inside the battle center. A street stretched out ahead of them, lined with skyscrapers and buildings. The whole area was a mock city. Kaya remained focused on following the yellow-haired kid, keeping up easily due to all the running and races she'd suffered through with her twin in the past months. Other examinees spread out into side streets, and she followed 𝗵𝗲 to the right. A 10-foot-tall green robot burst out of a building's front window and blocked their path, a big white 𝗬𝗧𝗵𝗲 painted on its side. Kaya froze, standing back to observe if the boy's boasting had any merit or if it was only a flirting tactic. 𝗵𝗲 ran towards the robot and placed his hands on the metal, shooting electric bolts through his skin. The robot twitched every which way and collapsed, smoking. It had indeed short-circuited. "Hell yeah." He laughed, proud of himself, and just then noticed the girl standing nearby. "You followed me?" "I was curious if you were bullshitting or not," she responded with a shrug, not about to tell him the truth. "You weren't. Shouldn't you be focusing on getting your points?" he asked, his head tilting with confusion. "I am." Before he could keep questioning her, another robot came at him, with its 3 on its side. It was fast, heading straight towards the boy. He managed to electrocute it before it could hit him with its long arms. Another robot jumped off a short building and landed in front of Kaya. Another 3-pointer. She dodged its attack, rolling onto her shoulder, and jumped back to her feet, ducking before it could hit her in the head. 𝗵𝗲 ran towards her, shouting, "Use your quirk. What are you waiting for?" She stretched out to touch his bare forearm, saying, "Eep." Kaya had no time to adjust to his body, nor his mind, and merely propelled him forward, towards the robot, activating his electrifying quirk. A yellow dome-like burst of energy exploded from him, and the robot's system fried like she'd meant it to. She'd felt the bolts tingle all over his body, yet also felt the effect of his electric attack on her own body, which was a much less pleasant experience. Kaya sat on the floor, recovering from the attack, and 𝗵𝗲 touched his chest as Kaya's consciousness tried to settle into his body properly to understand how the quirk functioned. Due to the loud bang sound, Kaya could hear other robots hurrying to their location. She got on her feet and made 𝗵𝗲 help her pull off a long stick-like portion of the robot collapsed in front of them. She twirled the metal rod around her hand, trying to get familiar with it before the other enemies arrived. She needed her own body to have a way to defend itself while she used 𝗵𝗲's quirk. A group of robots circled around them. 5 robots. 2 1-pointers, 2 3s, and a 2. Under the panic and mental strain, 𝗵𝗲's body stumbled as Kaya tried to make it run towards the strongest, biggest robots, the ones written 3 on their sides. She attempted that big bolt explosion again, and she managed it, frying the 2 robots over a distance, but the effort also made her snap back to her own body completely. She'd been fighting off the ones with the metal rod, and now that she could properly focus on her movements, she went on the attack and stabbed the two robots in their heads, where their cores were located. She'd noticed those parts smoke the most after 𝗵𝗲 short-circuited them. The boy had regained control of his own body and mind by then, and fought off the last robot before turning back to look at the girl in shock. "What the hell did you do to me?" he demanded, completely perplexed by what had happened. "Used you to get some points," she answered honestly, heading further down the street, towards the center of the fake city. "Now, come on, we've got to find other robots." "I'm not going with you, you stole my body," he argued, distraught. An ear-splitting screech and explosions came from the end of the street they had come from initially. An enormous robot emerged into view, tall as a skyscraper, and larger than two. The robot worth 0 points, the one they'd been advised to run away from. 𝗵𝗲 required no convincing and sprinted away with Kaya. They passed side streets. One was filled with ice walls and spiky icicles. Another had melted building fronts, like they'd been sprayed with acid. Another robot jumped out in front of them and the boy screamed, too startled to react helpfully. Kaya rolled her eyes and grabbed his hand. He tried pulling away for a split second, but then it was too late and she'd possessed him again. His bright blue eyes darkened until his irises were blood red. Kaya wasted no time in short-circuiting the robot in front of them and ran, the two bodies under her control sprinting at the same speed. This was easy for her, getting both to do the same movements. When the actions were different, however, that's when things became tricky. As mind-boggling as using both hands for different tasks at the same time, but multiplied by 1,000. She turned onto a street to the left, thinking it was better to deviate from the path than to try and outrun the giant machine. However, she ended up faced with a group of robots, an assortment of different points. She had 𝗵𝗲 run forward as her body stayed back, reluctant to get shocked herself, and had him shoot out the strongest voltage she could manage to produce without training with his quirk. The robots ahead all short-circuited when the blast hit them. However, it was too much for 𝗵𝗲 and he passed out, making her doubled consciousness leave his unconscious body. Kaya stared at him sprawled out on the pavement, the giant machine growing ever closer. "Ah shit, he can fry his own brain," she whispered to herself, torn about what to do. She couldn't exactly leave him there to the mercy of the robots, but if she stayed, she'd only have the stupid metal rod to defend them both. A wall of ice appeared beside her, and on top of it was the guy with half-white, half-red hair. He stared down at her, his eyes also different colors. He seemed to be using his ice to glide through the city much faster than running would allow him to be. "Leave him. That big robot's approaching," he advised in a dead-sounding voice. "I can't. It's my fault he's like this." "You move him with your ice thing," she told him. His eyebrows furrowed slightly with confusion. "I thought we weren't allowed to hurt other examinees." "I didn't hurt him, just take him with you, damn it," Kaya yelled, her deeply repressed anger making an appearance for a brief moment. The deafening sounds of the robot were getting louder, meaning it was approaching quickly. The boy with the ice quirk stared at her blankly. "I was only passing by. You say it's your fault, then he's your problem." He slid away, like he was surfing on an ice pathway. Kaya groaned in frustration, grabbed 𝗵𝗲's passed-out form and tossed him over her shoulder. It was a good thing she'd worked out her muscles so much beforehand, as she'd never have been able to lift such dead weight a few months prior. She hurried down the street, merely aiming to hide away, her leg muscles screaming under the extra weight. She'd made it to another, smaller side street when she was once again faced with a robot, a two-pointer. She had no way to destroy it and merely managed to dodge its attack and run, albeit slowly. Sweat rolled down her forehead, and she could hear the robot hurrying after her. 1 minute left. Present Mike shouted, his voice echoing through the skyscrapers. "No way, shit, shit, shit," Kaya muttered to herself, her pace slowing down as her muscles began to give up. She doubted she'd pass, having used a fellow examinee in such an underhanded way, but she didn't have much choice, did she? That was her quirk. Katsuki was sure to have passed with flying colors, she had no doubt about it. All he had to do was shoot the robots with his explosions and they'd shatter into smithereens. He'd been blessed with an extremely combat-effective quirk, after all. Knowing there was no way she could get any further carrying Kaminari like a potato sack, she set him down on the street as gently yet quickly as she could. Holding the damaged metal rod tightly, she turned to face the robot behind her. One-pointers had been reasonably easy to destroy with her stick, but this one, labeled with a 2, would be another story. She dodged and ducked and kept the robot distracted so it wouldn't head towards the unconscious boy. The machine hit her leg, twisting her ankle. She fell to her knees at the pain, yet she kept hitting the thing with the stick to keep it distracted, aware there was no way she'd be able to plunge it through its core. Clang, 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 tinny sounds reverberated through the street, probably calling other robots to their location. "Time's up," 𝗵𝗃 yelled. The robot froze in place, like it had been deactivated. 𝐒𝐫 let out a relieved, breathy laugh and let herself fall forward on her face. The wait was torture for both of the Bakugo twins. They were to wait at home for their UA letters to arrive, to inform them if they'd passed and would be enrolling into the hero course or not. No one was worried about whether Katsuki had passed or not, but they were all stressed about 𝗂𝐫. That resulted in even more yelling matches around the house, mostly between Katsuki and their mother, but even 𝗂𝐫 lost her patience once or twice. It was so rare it rendered the whole family quiet every time it happened. 𝗂𝐫's ankle had been fixed and healed by the school nurse's Quirk, a pro hero who could heal just about any injury with a puckered kiss. Her twin brother hadn't been hurt, of course, having destroyed for over 70 points worth of robots, if he'd counted correctly. She couldn't remember which points had been hers, and which were Kaminari's. "Kids, your letters have arrived. Shall we open them all together, or?" their father wondered, looking through a pile of letters as he walked into the kitchen for breakfast. "Gimme!" Katsuki shouted, jumping to his feet and making the table shake. 𝗂𝐫 caught her glass of milk before it could spill over. Although her brother's chocolate milk had been a lost cause, the liquid puddles spreading all over their father's morning journal. "Stop yelling so early in the morning," their mother yelled. 𝗂𝐫 set down her glass and stared at her breakfast, no longer hungry as stress filled her. "We'll start with me," Katsuki decided, shooting his sister a worried glance before opening his letter. A round metal object fell out onto the table, and a projection came out of it, creating an image on the kitchen wall. All Might, Katsuki's favorite hero, appeared, announcing he'd be teaching at UA. He went on to say Katsuki had passed the entrance exam in first place. "Congratulations, son." Their father smiled proudly. "Shut up," their mother scolded. "Keep praising him all the time and he'll become an even bigger brat than he is." Katsuki couldn't hide his grin, satisfied that he'd gotten first place, yet not surprised. Though he sobered up from his joy when he glanced at the envelope for his sister. Once the pre-recorded message ended, a tense silence filled the dining room. "Kai, open it," Katsuki told her. She shook her head. "You do it." He didn't argue and opened her letter, the same metal object dropping onto the table and projecting All Might's image. The top hero repeated the same speech about him now working at the prestigious hero school before the message stopped saying the same things as before. "Now, young 𝗂𝐫 Bakugo, your points do not exceed the passing mark. During the mock battle, by destroying robots either with your own physical ability and Mr. Kaminari's borrowed quirk, you managed to amass a total of 22 points. Unfortunately, that would not be enough. If it was the only thing being evaluated during the entrance exam," All Might said. She'd been staring at her hands morosely, refusing to see her brother's reaction to her failing the exam, until that last sentence. She slowly looked up at the projection, seeing All Might's wide grin. However, that is not the only thing that was evaluated. There were villain points, those collected from the robots. And there were rescue points. Behind All Might, a screen showed a video of 𝗂𝐫 running down a side street to get Kaminari out of the giant robot's path of destruction. Then, fighting off a smaller robot with the metal stick. You may have used your quirk against Denki Kaminari, but when you saw he was unconscious, you showed guilt and sacrificed your own safety to save him. You fought against the robot, exhausted, with a mere metal rod, instead of running to safety alone. The judges gave you 30 rescue points for that. You pass. Congratulations, you have been accepted into UA's hero course. The projection shut off. 𝗂𝐫 slowly turned her head to see her family all smiling at her. "I knew you'd get in," her mother exclaimed. Her father grabbed her shoulder. "I'm proud of you, sweetie." Katsuki, who was still standing, looked down at her, his red eyes shining. "See? We'll be top heroes together. It's not impossible." She smiled in relief, feeling as light as a feather. "Though it is pretty lame, hitting a robot with a metal stick," he grimaced. "How'd that get you a pass?" Their mother slapped the back of his head. "Eat your cereal. And treat you sister better, you brat." Erase her head. Chapter text. The Bakugo twins sat in the back of the classroom, waiting for everyone to arrive and for the first lesson to start. Katsuki propped his legs up on the desk, observing everyone who walked in with a smug air on his face. Kaya sat beside him, placing her school supplies neatly on her desk. She felt good about herself that morning. Since she'd managed to get into UA with her useless quirk, she felt she could do just about anything. The uniform helped her confidence as well. She especially liked the gray jacket with its dark green lines on the sleeves over the wrists, and the bright red tie which made her eyes pop. A very short boy walked in, purple bubbles covering his head instead of hair. His eyes were wide as they raked every girl in the room. Katsuki didn't care until the small guy's gaze locked on his twin. He made explosions burst out of one of his hands as he glared at the newcomer. "You wanna die?" The boy squealed. "No. Sorry." He scrambled to the utmost front of the classroom to sit as far from the twins as he could get. The pink girl entered, and so did the boy with the ice quirk and two-colored hair. A guy with a black bird head followed, then a cheery boy with red hair spiked upwards and pointy teeth. Denki Kaminari was the next person to walk in, and Kaya felt relieved at the sight of him. She'd worried she'd messed up his chances of getting into UA, but apparently all had worked out for both of them in the end. She figured it was because Kaminari had run towards her to help her before she'd taken advantage of his niceness. Perhaps that act of his had awarded him a bunch of rescue points. Kaminari noticed her as well and hurried to sit in the front, avoiding her gaze. "Don't put your feet on the desk," a black-haired guy ordered her brother. He wore rectangular glasses, and Kaya recognized him, but only because he'd questioned Present Mike during the explanation of the exam. "Huh." Katsuki sneered up at the tall boy. "Don't you think it's rude to the UA upperclassmen, and to the people who made the desk?" he said sternly. "Nope. What junior high did you go to, you side character?" Katsuki wondered rudely. Kaya snorted, amused he would keep calling people extras even in high school. She thought he might have stopped now that they'd changed schools for such a prestigious one. But no. The overly serious boy seemed taken aback but answered the question anyway. "I attended 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Private Academy. My name is 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏. 𝗬𝗵𝗲? So you're a damn elite, huh? Looks like I'll have fun crushing you." 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 jumped back in disbelief and repeated, "Crushing? That's quite cruel. Do you truly aim to become a hero? Tone it down, Kaken." Before he starts pissing his pants, Kaya smirked. Her brother snickered, glad that she was joining in with him, until he realized what she'd called him. He turned to her, glaring. "Hey, I'll kill you." "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot only your bestie, Deku, is allowed to call you that," she said in a sweet voice. "Why are you pissing me off? It's the nerd you should target, not me," he exploded. Katsuki's gaze focused on something at the opposite side of the classroom. Izuku stood in the doorway, staring at the scene with big, frightened eyes. 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 hurried to go greet the newcomer. A girl with light brown hair also arrived, and she seemed to know Izuku because she began chatting with him, or to him, as he was red in the face and too nervous to respond with actual words. The teacher finally made his appearance, laying on the ground in a yellow sleeping bag by the door. "Okay, it took 8 seconds for you to be quiet. Time is limited," the man said in a quiet, monotone voice. He got up and unzipped the sleeping bag to step out of it. He wore dark clothes, along with a long white fabric loosely wrapped around his neck. Black hair waved down to his shoulders, and his eye bags nearly reached the middle of his cheeks. "You kids are not rational enough." The whole classroom had quieted, the students too perplexed by the man's worn-out appearance to keep chatting amongst themselves. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out onto the field," he said as he pulled out some clothes from his yellow sleeping bag. Much to Kaya's disappointment, she had to change out of the nice school uniform and into the new outfit. A blue jumpsuit with white and red details. As the class walked outside, towards the field out back, she began noticing other students whispering about and glancing towards her and Katsuki. "I heard he landed first place in the entrance exam," a girl with chin-length purple hair whispered to another. "I saw him destroy all those robots. It was scary." "He was laughing like a madman," an invisible girl whispered back, only her uniform was visible, floating in midair. Kaminari overheard them and said in a hushed voice, "Trust me, he's not the scariest twin." "What? No way. She seems nice enough," the first girl contended in disbelief. "You'll understand once you see her quirk," he said, a grim expression on his usually bright face. Kaya frowned at what she'd overheard, and decided to mentally prepare herself for much worse reactions in the upcoming weeks. Izuku hurried to catch up to her, holding a notebook in his hands. "Kaya. Hi, I didn't know you had a quirk, you never showed off anything. But I'm glad you got into UA too. So, what can you do, hm? Create explosions like Kakin? Maybe out of your feet instead?" Katsuki, who stood on Kaya's other side, reached past her and slapped Izuku behind the head. "You're the only quirkless one here. Got it, Deku? Now stop pestering my sister for your stupid data book." Izuku rubbed the back of his head, slowing down and letting the twins pass him. Once they'd reached the field, a large area with white lines drawn on the sandy dirt, their new teacher announced they would be holding a quirk assessment test right that moment. "What about the entrance ceremony? The orientation?" the brown-haired girl who knew Izuku, Ochako Uraraka, asked. "If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events," Aizawa stated in his usual monotonal voice. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. Kaya realized she was fiddling with her fingernails and quickly threw her hands inside her pant pockets. She didn't want the others to know just how nervous she felt about the quirk assessment test. She didn't know what it would entail yet, but anything regarding her quirk made her uneasy. "You kids have been doing these since junior high, right?" Aizawa continued, holding up a phone that listed the categories in which they would be tested. Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from results of students not using their quirks. It's not rational. Katsuki Bakugo, you finished at the top of the practical exam, right? In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? Katsuki said, 67 meters. Then try doing it with your quirk, the homeroom teacher told him, pointing towards a circle in the dirt. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Hurry up. Give it all you've got. Katsuki went to stand in the circle, pulled his arm back, and threw the softball with all his strength, adding a blast just as he released the ball, yelling, "Die!" The softball soared high into the sky with a trail of smoke and flames, landing much further than Katsuki's previous record. "Die!" Izuku squeaked out, perplexed by the violence directed towards a mere ball. "Know your own maximum first," Aizawa said. "That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero." The teacher showed the phone screen to the class. The softball had a tracker in it, so the phone displayed the distance the ball had been thrown. 705.2 meters. Most students gasped in awe at the score. Kaya did not. Partly because she was used to seeing her twin ace everything. There seemed to exist nothing he couldn't excel at except, perhaps, people skills. However, it was mainly because she was too stressed about the upcoming test. All the categories were solo activities. Her quirk was useless when she was alone, so how was this test supposed to help her know her own maximum? Alright. Whoever comes in last place after the 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion, Aizawa announced, a dark smile. On his tired face, like the prospect of ruining a student's day entertained him. Kaya could not say nothing. She stepped forward and asked, "And what if someone's quirk requires another person's participation? Can they get help?" The teacher's gaze locked onto her, and she noticed how bloodshot his dark gray eyes were under his long bangs. "Oh, these are solo tests. A hero won't always be accompanied, and therefore must not be worthless on their own." But he interrupted her. And when you have a question regarding yourself, don't ask it as though it's not about you. If you get last place in all the tests, you will be expelled, no matter your quirk's technicalities. It's not worth complaining. We teachers are free to do what we want about the circumstances of our students. Welcome to UA's hero course. The other students nodded, or smiled, filled with determination. Kaya and Izuku were the only ones left trembling. Katsuki strutted towards his sister and wrapped his arm around her shoulders, chuckling lowly. Stop stressing out. You'll be fine. This proves we didn't train our bodies for months in vain. It's practically impossible for you to get last for these 8 tests. If someone's really getting expelled today, it's Deku. You'd like that, she said with a half-smile. Her brother wasn't wrong. She was more physically fit than she'd ever been before, and if she could run from robots with a passed-out guy on her shoulder, then she could survive a morning of basic gym tests. The first challenge was the 50-meter run. Students stood by the white lines on the ground designated for such runs, and sprinted 2 at a time. A small machine announced each person's time once they crossed the finish line. 𝗕𝗏𝗍𝐼 had small exhaust pipes shooting out the back of his calves. He had an engine like Quirk, so he zoomed past the finish line in a second or two. A girl with frog-like looks, 𝗬𝗓𝗍𝐼, quickly hopped down the track like a frog would. Other students used their quirks to help them as well, only making Kaya more nervous. Would she really only last a day at this school? Getting expelled was more embarrassing than not getting in at all, she thought. Katsuki and Izuku's turn came up. The blond boy held his hands behind his back, using his blast to propel him forward at high speeds. His feet only touched the ground after he reached the finish line. Izuku, on the other hand, sprinted as quickly as he could with no quirk to lean on and didn't get a good score. Then came Kaya's turn. She was up against a French student who could shoot a laser out of his belly button. He tried to use it to propel himself, but since he couldn't activate his quirk for longer than 1 second yet, he stumbled and fell in the middle of the track, losing his time advantage. Kaya sprinted as fast as her legs could take her, her twin yelling out encouragements beside her. She had beat Izuku by 3 seconds, but that did not reassure her in the slightest. The next tests didn't go horribly for her, but Izuku did manage to beat her in a few of the tests like grip strength and sit-ups. Her brother's encouragements slowly turned into threats as he, too, realized Kaya and Izuku weren't far off from each other in the results. Go Kai! You better not lose to Deku, he shouted with his raspy voice. She clenched her teeth and kept trying her best without letting her frustration get the best of her. Finally came the last test. The ball throw. She didn't get great results, but she wasn't last. So far, it was the small guy with purple bubbles on his head. Minoru Mineta. Izuku's turn came up and he walked inside the circle on the ground, trembling with anxiety. Kaya hid her nerves better, at least. It doesn't look good for Midoriya if he continues like this, 𝗕𝗏𝗍𝐼 remarked from the sidelines. Of course not. Katsuki scoffed. He's a quirkless small fry, you know. Quirkless. Are you not aware of what he did in the entrance exam? Huh. Katsuki turned to his sister, baffled. You know anything about this? She shook her head, focused on Izuku as he prepared to throw the softball. His arm began to glow strangely, but he threw the ball and nothing extraordinary happened as it landed barely 40 meters away. Izuku seemed distraught, staring at his hands. I was definitely trying to use it just now. I erased your quirk, Aizawa stated. His strange cloth-like wraps were floating around his head, revealing yellow goggles hanging around his neck. His eyes glowed an unnatural bright red as he stared intensely at Izuku. That entrance exam was definitely not rational enough. Even a kid like you was accepted? The students began murmuring amongst themselves, recognizing the pro-hero at last. Eraserhead, a hero whose quirk let him erase others' quirks by looking at them, though the effect stopped when he blinked. Aizawa scolded Izuku, saying he couldn't control his power yet, and that it was irrational to use a quirk that left him incapacitated. That spurred on more murmurs about how Izuku had destroyed the giant zero-pointer robot in Battle Center B with 1 punch, but that had apparently left him with an obliterated arm and broken legs. The Bakugo twins glanced at each other, trying to make sense of the rumors to no avail. They'd known Izuku for many years, and he had always gone on about not having a quirk and wanting one desperately. After nearly a minute of muttering to himself, Izuku threw the ball. His index finger lit up strangely at the last second and the softball launched into the air at inhumane speeds, landing him the same score as Katsuki. Everyone gasped, shocked by the raw power and his broken finger. Kaya stared blankly, defeated. She didn't know how it was possible for Izuku to suddenly have a quirk, nor did she care. All she could think of was how embarrassing it would be to walk out of 𝐒𝐻𝐁, expelled after barely half a day. Blasts erupted from Katsuki's hands, his terrifying glare glued on Izuku as he began stomping his way. "What's the meaning of this?" he snarled. Kaya grabbed her brother's arm before he could jump on the other boy. She knew how violent he could get, probably better than anyone. Her consciousness in Katsuki's body stopped his quirk and made him take a deep breath, for appearances. She knew he despised when she did this in public. It hurt his ego when other people saw him being controlled and overpowered by his twin. Some of the students had noticed their altercation without understanding what was truly happening and watched, muttering amongst themselves about Katsuki's ridiculously explosive temper. She could feel him fighting for control as her vision through Katsuki's red eyes became blurry and she could hear his internal shouting. "Let me kill him. I'll kill you. Egg." She pushed back against his resistance, struggling. When he was this enraged, it was much more difficult to possess him for longer than 30 seconds. "Calm down, Suki," her own body said and rubbed his shoulder, partly so that the others wouldn't get suspicious, but also to try and reach him despite his fury. It seemed to only anger Katsuki more, and she lost control of him, snapping back into her own body fully. "Tell me what's going on, you bastard," he shouted, sprinting with both his hands blasting like crazy. Izuku let out a high-pitched scream, frozen in place at the sight of his furious bully coming for him. Aizawa stopped Katsuki in his tracks, the cloth wraps having flown out to hold him in place. The teacher explained that the wraps were a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and a special metal alloy, his eyes glowing red again as he prevented Katsuki from using his quirk. After demanding that people stop making him have to use his quirk because he has dry eye, Aizawa released him and walked off. Katsuki stayed in place, glaring at the floor with his fists clenched tightly. Izuku hurried past him before he went on the attack again, and went to join his new friends. Kaya slowly approached her brother. Why? He growled to himself. "Maybe Deku's quirk manifested really late," she told him, well aware that the latest a quirk manifested was always 4 years old. "Don't you talk to me," he snarled, looking at her with hateful red eyes identical to hers. "You know I hate it when you do that." She looked down, remaining quiet. It was useless to apologize. She wouldn't mean it. "What? You like Deku now? Or is it that you wanted to feel like a hero one last time before you get expelled?" "'Cause with that throw, Deku's definitely made up for his bad scores," Katsuki said in a low taunting voice. He pushed past her, letting his shoulder hit hers. She stayed where she was, alone in the middle of the field. She was used to this. Fighting with her twin because he got angry about something or another and he chose to release his frustration on her. It used to make her explode in rage too. Until someday she grew tired of the anger and gave up. Stopped caring. This outburst was a little harder to ignore as she truly wanted to develop her quirk and stop being so useless. Rubbing salt in the wound like he'd just done made her heart grow hotter with rage. "Mr. Aizawa's about to announce the scores," a voice told her. Kaya turned to see the boy with half-red, half-white middle-parted hair. Shoto Todoroki. Now that she could observe him properly, as the last time they'd talked she'd been too busy to, she noticed he had a big scar over one eye, the patch of skin reddened and burnt. His expression was neutral, though she wondered why he'd taken the time to come warn her. Especially when it was clear to everyone that she'd be expelled in a minute or two. She nodded and marched off towards the rest of the class as they all stood in front of the teacher. His phone was projecting the scores for everyone to see, with Katsuki in 3rd place, Izuku in 19th, and Kaya in last. "Sir, I have a question," Kaya called out and went to the front of the group, ignoring the others' confused gazes. "Your quirk would have been useless during these physical tests too. You need someone else to show off your abilities, to know your own maximum. Yet you're a pro hero. So how is it rational for you to expel the student with the worst scores if you'd fail this test yourself, Eraserhead? Aizawa stared at her with bloodshot gray eyes. As I was about to say, I was lying about the expulsion. Kaya opened her mouth, then closed it again. Some of the others gasped out in shock. The girl who'd gotten first place, Momo Yaoyorozu, seemed surprised that not everyone had caught on that it had been a lie, claiming it had been obvious. He added, it was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your abilities. It worked, even for you, Kaya Bakugo. You showed how physically capable you are, and if it wasn't for Midoriya's ball throw, you wouldn't have been last, never once using your quirk. And with that, we're done here. There are handouts with the school rules and such in the classroom, so when you get back, look them over. The students began trudging off to go change inside. The teacher handed a note to Izuku, telling him to go to the nurse to get his finger fixed. Wait, I need to talk to you for a minute, Aizawa told Kaya as she'd been about to walk past him. Kaya glanced towards her twin, who was determinedly ignoring her, still pouting. A few other students seemed confused by the teacher's demand, but walked away without a word. Once only Aizawa and Kaya remained standing in the field, the teacher said, I saw you stop your twin. Do you do that often? You've seen his temper, she responded with a small shrug. Civilians aren't allowed to use their quirks so freely against others, he stated. I didn't exactly have a choice growing up with how my brother is. When we were 8, Katsuki nearly blew up the kitchen because I ate the last cookie, she said with a hint of indignation. Even though he'd never admit it, he needs me here to do what I just did. To keep him in check so that he can become the #1 hero. Eraserhead frowned. Are you here because you want to be, or because your brother wants you to be? Both, I guess. It'd be nice to learn how to stop being useless. You saw what happened. Katsuki pushed me out within seconds. I erased your quirk, he interrupted her. It wasn't your fault? What? Why? I wanted to see if Mr. Bakugo really is that hot-headed and dangerous, to know what I'll have to deal with this year. Aizawa went silent for a moment, studying the young girl in front of him. I lied about lying earlier. I've expelled students on the first day before, cut whole classrooms in half. I intended on expelling you and Midoriya this morning. However, you both proved to me that you have potential. You were right, I would have failed today's test myself. Perhaps the next assessments will be better suited for your quirk. Kaya couldn't believe her ears. A pro hero had just acknowledged that she had potential to become a hero herself, to becoming useful. I'll set up a meeting with the principal as soon as possible to discuss your situation, he added. What do you mean, my situation? She wondered. Your quirk is possession, isn't it? To practice it, you need volunteers. Who would agree to that, except maybe your brother? Besides, possessing Katsuki is easier for you since he's your twin, right? She nodded slowly, understanding what he meant and growing worried herself. If you're serious about becoming a hero, you'll need to get a lot better very quickly. Only practicing with your twin won't get you very far, he said gravely. I've said all I had to. Go join the others. Yes, sir, Kaya said and hurried off, relieved this wouldn't be her last day after all. Katsuki spent the evening pouting and giving his sister the silent treatment, apart from some growling and remarks snarled under his breath. Their mother gave him a hard time about that, and also about getting third place, which only angered him some more. Once the twins had helped with the chores, such as cleaning the kitchen and washing the dishes, they both went upstairs to their respective rooms. Kaya looked through the papers she'd received at school, the curriculum, her schedule, and a map of the school's layout as it included many separate buildings. Her door burst open and Katsuki stomped inside. She didn't turn around, remaining at her desk, her back to the door. She hadn't been startled either, used to him barging in to vent, to apologize, or to simply chat. His heavy footsteps approached her desk chair and he looked over her shoulder at the papers sprawled on the desk. You checked our schedule yet? Every morning's filled with normal school classes. How damn boring. English, math, history, like we'd need that shit to become heroes? Katsuki complained. Kaya remained silent, her gaze glued on the map, though she wasn't focusing on it. Her brother cleared his throat and muttered, I'm sorry I said those mean things. I'm honestly glad you didn't get expelled today. What did you say? She asked, finally turning to get a good look at him. His previously remorseful expression twisted and a vein protruded on his forehead. I said getting expelled today would have made you a damn loser. Really? I thought I heard you apologize for being an asshole, 𝐒𝐫 said with a devious smile. Fuck off. You always do this, he exploded. What more do you want, 𝐒𝐫? Deku pissed me off and then you trying to stop me publicly made it worse. That's all there was to it? Okay, she said in a calm voice. It's not like she'd been the one to give him the silent treatment. You really don't know anything about that self-destructive quirk Deku's got? If I did, would I have tried to kill him? I know I'm supposed to say no, but you threaten to kill him 5 times a day. Yeah, threaten. Not try. Katsuki grabbed her shoulder, massaging it subconsciously. He bent down so he could be at eye level with her, 2 identical gazes staring into the other. You'll tell me if you hear anything, and I mean anything, regarding Deku's supposed quirk, right? It offends me that you even have to ask, she said with a slight shake of her head. Of course I'll tell you. I may hate your guts, but I've always got your back. He gave her one of his rare genuine smiles. Ditto. Their second morning at UA was much less eventful than the first, as they were hit with math and science with a 15-minute break in between the 2 classes. If there was one thing she'd always been as good as Katsuki at, or even better at, it was school. Most subjects interested her, so it was easy for her to stay focused. Her brother was good, but it bored him too much. Lunch was held in a huge cafeteria room, where good meals were served for low prices. The Bakugo twins sat together, and the only other student who dared join their table was Shoto Todoroki, but he sat on the opposite end, focused on his bowl of noodles. If her brother wasn't there, 𝐒𝐫 would have probably sat with Izuku and his friends, Ochako Uraraka and Tenya Ida, or the group of girls to try and make new friends. She'd had some friends in her class in junior high, but none of them had decided to attend UA high school. Unfortunately, 𝐒𝐫 felt like she couldn't leave Katsuki to eat alone, and no one in their right mind would sit with him due to his ridiculous temper. Back in class, the students waited for the teacher to arrive, chatting amongst themselves. All Might showed up in full costume, red and white with yellow gloves and a blue cape, his over-enlarged muscles bulging under the skin-tight material. The students seemed excited by his arrival, their eyes wide and shining. Even Katsuki couldn't hide the sparkle in his gaze. I teach hero basic training, All Might boomed. It is a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basics of being a hero. Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today -- he pulled out a large card written battle on it, combat training. Katsuki grinned maliciously and repeated, combat. 𝐒𝐫 did not have the same reaction. If this training was anything like the previous days, she would be having no fun. And to go with that are these. All Might pointed to the wall dramatically. The white wall to their left was actually long rows of drawers, which opened up to reveal futuristic-looking numbered suitcases. Costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started, All Might explained. After you change, gather in ground beta. The whole class buzzed with excitement at the prospect of finally have their own hero costumes. Even 𝐒𝐫 couldn't wait to see what had been created for her, as she hadn't given many directions or requests herself, apart from her measurements. She'd had no clue what could be useful to her. 20 minutes later, All Might waited by the large entrance for his students to come out in their costumes. Slowly, they emerged out of the darkness. Katsuki wore loose black cargo pants and a black tank top which had a large orange X across the chest. His boots were chunky and heavy-looking, balancing out the big forearm guards shaped like green grenades on his arms. 𝐒𝐫 walked out confidently, satisfied with what the costume makers had come up with. Her pants were like her brother's, black cargo pants, but they were tightly fitted. The black combat boots had thick soles, and the turtleneck shirt was skin-tight, dark red, and made of a stretchy, breathable material. An inch-wide black line ran down the center of her shirt from the top of her neck to the end of the shirt, and another black line circled the smallest part of her waist. The sleeves were long, partly covering the top of her hands, though leaving her palms bare for her quirk. A thick black belt with small pockets hung on her hips. Inside those were useful tools like handcuffs and smoke bombs. A retractable lightweight black baton was also secured to the belt, making 𝐒𝐭𝐲 realize those who'd created her outfit had watched the videos of her entrance exam for inspiration. She pulled at the accessory on her head, frowning. Her wild blonde hair was pulled back into her usual high ponytail, and her spiky bangs were in her face like always. The costume had come with a black headband that had 2 curved horns. She didn't understand their use, but she hadn't had the opportunity to look in the mirror either. While All Might went on about how the clothes make the man, and how their costumes made them official heroes in training, Katsuki noticed his sister toying with her headpiece and chuckled. "What?" she demanded, well aware that her brother usually only laughed at the misery of others. "You didn't add any specifications for the design of your costume, did you?" he answered with a question. "No, why?" Katsuki shrugged. "Well, I did." "What?" she exclaimed. "I saw you left the form practically blank and decided to help you out." 𝐒𝐭𝐲 looked herself over, just then understanding the details of the design. The black lines on her shirt looked like an upside-down cross when viewed from the front, and the horns were self-explanatory. "You know who possesses people? Demons." "Yeah, you're welcome. You look nearly as badass as I do," he said, head held high and proud of himself. "I hate you," she stated. "But thanks." "Hey, it's no big deal. That's what big brothers are for." "By literally 26 seconds, idiot. I've been first since birth. It's definitely a sign that I'll become #1 hero," he drawled. Before 𝐒𝐭𝐲 could strangle her big-headed twin, All Might complimented them all on their costumes and clapped his hands, ready to get to business. "Now, it's time for combat training," he announced. "Sir?" 𝗕𝗏𝐼𝐴 called out, raising his hand. His costume made him look like a robot, made of silver metal with navy details, a helmet hiding his face completely. "This is a battle center from the entrance exam, so will we be conducting urban battles again?" "No, we're going to be moving ahead 2 steps. Most of the time, fighting villains takes place outside, but if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate. Imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals, All Might listed. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. For this class, you'll be split into villains and heroes and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles." 𝐒𝐭𝐲's eyebrows lifted with pleasant surprise. The 2-on-2 battle format meant that she'd have a teammate and human foes, so her quirk had more chances of being useful without angering anyone on her team. Plus, the fact that the battle would be held indoors was better for her. She didn't have any form of speed enhancement and no way of flying, so large outdoor arenas were disadvantageous for her. The students showered All Might with questions, and the top hero pulled out a script to explain the scenario. The 2 villains were to guard a fake nuclear weapon inside a building, and the 2 heroes were tasked with finding them. They needed to either capture the villains or touch the weapon within the allotted time limit, while the villains had to capture the heroes or prevent them from touching the nuke. Teams and their opponents would be chosen by drawing lots, and so All Might began pulling names out of a box. Izuku was called forward with Ochako Uraraka as they'd been picked to form a hero team. The girl's costume was navy and pink, a skin-tight suit with bulky round boots, a typical-looking hero costume. Izuku walked forward, and it took 𝐒𝐭𝐲 a second to realize it was him. Once she did, however, she grabbed her brother's wrist to get him to notice as well, and they both erupted in laughter. The boy wore a green-blue jumpsuit with 2 long antennae-like ears on top of his head. "Quirk or not, Bunny Boy's still a loser, see? No need to try and kill him, he's no competition." 𝐒𝐭𝐲 snickered. All Might called out the villain team up against Izuku and Uraraka, pulling their names out of the box. 𝗕𝗏𝐼𝐴. Katsuki Bakugo. Either way, he's dead bunny meat. Her brother smirked maliciously. 𝐒𝐭𝐲 shook her head, exasperated with him yet hopeful that he'd win this battle. If he won something against Izuku, perhaps it would calm his temper for a day or 2, giving her a much-needed break. Damn demon. Chapter text. Let's start the indoor person-to-person combat training between teams A and D now. All Might announced through a speaker to the fighting teams. Izuku and Ochako Uraraka, as well as Katsuki and 𝗕𝗏𝐼𝐴 were already in the battle building, ready to start. The rest of Class 1A stood in a large room inside an adjacent building with their teacher, watching a giant screen. It took up an entire wall space, showing different camera angles. Kaya made sure to stand in the front, wanting front row seats for her twin's battle against his nemesis. Okay, everyone, you all should watch carefully and think. There will be much to learn from this, All Might advised them. The hero team, Izuku and Ochako, snuck into the building through a window using Ochako's quirk, zero gravity. It allowed them to float up to a higher story to infiltrate the villain's base. Within a minute, Katsuki ambushed them with a surprise attack, which Izuku managed to dodge at the last second. A surprise attack from the start? Mineta gasped, eyes wide as he stared up at the screen. Bakugo, that's cheating. A surprise attack isn't manly at all, the boy with spiked-up red hair exclaimed. Ijiro Kirishima, whose quirk, called hardening, allowed him to sharpen or harden any area of his skin. He's playing his role. Villains don't care about fighting with honor, Kaya stated in a condescending tone, her eyes glued to the screen. Exactly, All Might agreed. A surprise attack is a strategy too. They're in the middle of a real battle right now. Katsuki came for Izuku again, but the smaller boy caught his arm, having known what move the other would make. Izuku flipped him over, to the surprise of everyone watching. Izuku panted, looking down at Katsuki who was sprawled out on the floor. He spoke to him, though the other students couldn't hear since the cameras didn't have microphones. Katsuki got to his feet, his glare darkened with hatred as he slowly approached Izuku who stood in a defensive stance, trembling. Katsuki's hands blasted with explosions as he yelled out, and Kaya figured it was probably about how much he hates Deku. They fought some more, and Izuku predicted Katsuki's moves, though he couldn't do anything but dodge. Izuku chose to run away and managed to hide from the other in the maze-like fourth floor of the building. Kaya watched her brother grow angrier and angrier, and felt exasperated by his constantly reckless abandon with his emotions. He stopped, lost, his hands blasting like crazy as he yelled some more. He seems real angry, it's pretty scary, not gonna lie, Kaminari remarked with a disbelieving laugh. Meanwhile, Ochako found the fake nuclear weapon and 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏, who'd stayed to protect it. Katsuki finally found Izuku and pointed his grenade-shaped arm guards at him. Kaya knew they were meant to be missile launchers, if the costume creators had successfully invented what her brother wanted. Like her, his quirk originated in the sweat glands of his hands. Whereas she could transfer a part of her consciousness into another person if the liquid she produced touched their skin, Katsuki released nitroglycerin-like sweat which he could make explode. Those grenade gauntlets stored that liquid for him, allowing him to shoot giant bombs. All Might seemed to catch on to what Katsuki was planning and talked into a mic. Bakugo, stop. Are you trying to kill him? He responded, as All Might's earpiece lit up, but the students couldn't hear what he said. They could only watch him pull the pin and send a blast of flames and smoke to the wall behind Izuku. The cement wall was destroyed and the entire building shook with the force of the blast. The screens showing what the cameras on that floor recorded had blacked out due to the thick smoke. This is supposed to be a class, Kirishima complained, astounded by the violence. All Might called out into his mic, young man. Midoriya. The smoke cleared to reveal Izuku had not been injured, only pushed away. Katsuki was advancing towards him again, taunting him before attacking once more. Sir, you should stop them. That Bakugo's really crazy. Kirishima insisted. Kaya didn't argue with him because he wasn't exactly wrong. He's gonna kill him. No. All Might said, focused on the screen. He raised the small microphone to his mouth again. Young Bakugo, the next time you use that, I'll stop the fight and your team will lose. To attack on such a large scale indoors is inviting the destruction of the stronghold you should be protecting. That is a foolish plan for both the heroes and villains. You will lose a lot of points for it. That pissed off Katsuki some more, and he ran for Izuku. He went to punch with his right fist, but knowing Izuku would catch his arm again, he instead sent a small burst to his face, blinding him with smoke, then blasted himself upwards to send an explosion to Izuku's back. One he didn't predict, so the blast hit him with full force. What was that just now? Kirishima wondered as some other students gasped. Kaya smirked, amused. The other students all thought her brother was an idiot because of his ridiculous temper. Shoto Todoroki spoke up from behind her, although he usually remained silent. "He doesn't look like the type to think, but he's more subtle than I expected," he said. Kaya observed him, noticing his costume for the first time. Half of his body was covered in fake ice, from head to toe, hiding his red hair and the scar over his eye. The other half of him wore regular light-colored clothes, and his white hair remained unhidden. "What do you mean?" Kirishima asked him. "He changed his course in a blast that doubled as a smoke screen and then did it again immediately," Todoroki stated. Momo Yaoyorozu spoke up, getting in a clean hit. While fighting against inertia requires fine lateral adjustments to the power of the explosions. "You know what that means?" Kaya looked around the group of students who were paying attention to the discussion behind her. "It means you shouldn't underestimate my brother." "Yeah, especially not in his desire to kill Midoriya." Kirishima scoffed and pointed at the screen. Katsuki kept showering him with punches and attacks without giving the other a chance to think, then threw him down to the floor. "This is a lynching," Mina Ishido exclaimed. "He can capture him for this exercise by just wrapping the tape around him." The boy with the crow head said, "Those are not the actions of a hero." "Well, I won't argue about that. Katsuki often takes things way too damn far," Kaya grumbled, rubbing her upper arms. They watched Izuku run away again, though towards a window. Katsuki caught up, and they both sprinted towards each other. One blasted crazily out of his hand, while the other's arm glowed with strange veins of bright light. Kirishima insisted All Might should stop them as it looked like it would end badly, and for a reason Kaya couldn't fathom, the top hero seemed awfully torn. Before he could finally stop them, Izuku yelled out something and Ochako could be seen, in another camera's view, jumping onto a support beam and holding on for dear life. Izuku punched upwards, sending the force of his quirk to the ceiling, destroying everything directly above him until the air wave burst through the top of the building. It broke the floor where the two others were, and Ochako used the debris to her advantage, using her quirk to send them towards Tenya Ida, distracting him long enough so she could make herself float and land on the fake nuclear weapon. The students watching remained silent with shock at the hero team's sudden win. Both of Izuku's arms were heavily injured, one from Katsuki's explosion, and the other from using his own quirk. Kaya closed her eyes and took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for her twin's temper tantrum. He wasn't used to losing, especially not against someone he perceived to be a pebble, like Deku. Indoor person-to-person combat training. Hero team wins. All Might announced. Izuku lay passed out on the ground by Katsuki's feet, and Ochako puked, exhausted, while Tenya Ida panicked about her state beside her. They were sent to the infirmary to receive treatment, and All Might brought the others to join their classmates in order to review how the first battle had gone. Katsuki entered, silent, avoiding the class and standing in the back. Kaya glanced at him, torn between wanting to comfort him and wanting to stay alive. The way he was trembling only meant he'd push her away if she tried to talk to him, so she chose to remain where she was. All Might announced that the MVP had been Tenya Ida, and Momo went on a long speech to explain how he'd adapted best to the context of the training. The hero team only won because it was training, as they didn't treat the weapon like it was truly dangerous. Katsuki had only acted on a personal grudge, which didn't warrant any praise either. "All right everyone. Let's change locations and start the next match," All Might told the class. "Tackle this training by keeping in mind what we just discussed." "Yes, sir," the class chanted and followed their teacher out. The next match's teams were announced. Tsuyu Azui and 𝗵𝗔 Tokoyami as villains, 𝗬𝗁𝗔 and Kaya Bakugo as heroes. 𝗬𝗁𝗔 glanced towards her teammate with a nervous smile before approaching her. "Let's do our best." Kaya, who'd been watching her brother grumble under his breath from afar, blinked in surprise at the girl and nodded. They were given maps of the new, undestroyed building, and also given 10 minutes to memorize it and come up with a plan. All Might left them alone on the street and wished them good luck before heading inside to lead the villain team to the weapon they had to protect. Kaya studied the map, watching for patterns between the different floors. "What's your quirk?" she asked 𝗬𝗁𝗔 suddenly. Her piercing red eyes surveyed the short girl's face before looking her up and down, searching for clues. 𝗬𝗁𝗧𝗏 had chin-length purple hair with a fringe, and wore a salmon-colored ripped shirt under a black leather jacket along with dark pants and shoes. What clued Kaya in, however, were the long flesh cords hanging from her ears. At the ends were earphone jacks. Something about sound? Yeah, she said, taking one of the cords between her fingers and twisting it. If I plug these jacks into my boots, I can send strong vibration-like attacks with my heartbeat, and if I plug them into my surroundings, I can hear every little thing. So if you plug your ear jacks into the wall, you can hear where the villains are? Kaya raised an eyebrow. The other girl nodded. So I've been memorizing this map for nothing? 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 giggled. Not for nothing, it can still be useful. But yes, we'll find that weapon in no time. Even if they're really quiet, they can't shut off their heartbeat, nor stop breathing, can they? Kaya frowned. I guess not. We're against a frog and a shadow bird thing. Do you think they fight in close quarters or long distance? I've never seen them fight, so I don't know. 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 shook her head. What's your quirk? No one seems to know except Denki, but he refuses to talk about it. And now, I've gotta admit, your demon horns are freaking me out a little. Katsuki calls me a demon when he's pissed at me. He's the one who sent those design requests for me, she said in a dead-sounding voice. As a sort of inside joke. But that doesn't answer my question, 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 said, her thin eyebrows pulling together. Now, let's start the second indoor 2-on-2 combat training match. All Might's voice sounded loudly in the earpieces the girls had been given to communicate with each other over long distances. The 15-minute countdown started, and 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 said, "Follow me silently, okay? We'll find the weapon and figure out what to do then. I'm telling you right now, I'm not a great fighter yet." "Okay," Kaya said. "And I don't appreciate the fact that you're not telling me anything about yourself," 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 added, narrowing her eyes at the other girl before heading in through the steel door, motioning for Kaya to hurry and follow. 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 plugged both earphone jacks into a wall by the entrance, closing her eyes and focusing. Once she opened them up again, she showed a 3 with her fingers and pointed at the ceiling. Kaya went towards the closest staircase, but 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 stopped her, putting a hand in front of her and shaking her head. "Tokoyami's coming down those," she whispered. The hero team hurried down the hallway to the opposite side of the building, where they remembered there being another staircase. They climbed up to the 3rd floor and snuck around through the empty and confusing halls, knowing Tokoyami was now downstairs and 𝗬𝗪𝗎 was alone. 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 plugged her earphone jacks into another wall, listening in once again. Kaya watched her, impressed with how useful her quirk was. She felt bad about keeping her own from her, but she didn't want her teammate to get nervous about touching her, or whatever else. In junior high, most of the kids had been wary of Kaya, refusing to understand that she wouldn't randomly possess them for fun, but them knowing she was Katsuki's twin hadn't helped things. They assumed she had the same malicious streak too. Denki Kaminari's reaction to her was expected after what she'd done, and another reason to prove her right in keeping it secret for as long as she could. 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 motioned for Kaya to follow her down another large corridor all the way to a room. A dozen support beams filled the room, and by the wall opposite the door was the 15-foot-high fake nuke. Beside it, 𝗬𝗪𝗎 was crouched in a frog-like stance, her tongue sticking out from her mouth. "Tokoyami, they're here," she said into her earpiece. Kaya clenched her fists, worried that the other villain would show up. The hero team weren't skilled fighters, and having the 2 enemies here would make their task of touching the weapon much more difficult, especially since she didn't know the extent of either of their quirks. 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 plugged her earphone jack into one of her boots, sending off violent vibrations to distract 𝗬𝗪𝗎. The waves of sound didn't shock her like 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 had hoped, nor did they push her away since her frog-like fingers were glued to the ground. Out of options, 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲 stopped her attack and ran towards the nuke. However, the frog-like girl was quicker. Her extremely long frog tongue shot out and wrapped itself around 𝐒𝐭𝐞𝐲. It threw her further down the room, by the door. Kaya turned to see if she was okay and found her sprawled on the ground, holding her head as she tried to get back to her feet. Tokoyami appeared in the doorway, 2 giant shadow talons protruding from his back, raised and ready to grab either hero and wrap them up in capture tape. Kaya knew there was only one way they could win. She ran away from the door, towards the weapon. Like she'd expected, 𝗬𝗪𝗎's tongue shot out again and wrapped around her. Kaya put her hands over the slimy pink flesh and activated her quirk. The 1A students watched the huge screen with rapt attention. "Oh, The villain team's totally gonna win this time. Kirishima exclaimed, focused on the 4 students facing off against each other inside the stronghold. Without Kyoka, what could the Bakugo twin possibly do against Tokoyami and Tsuyu? They watched Kaya get wrapped up in 𝗬𝐬𝐻𝐈's tongue, and some of them cheered for their frog friend. Momo commented, that wasn't smart, running towards Tsuyu. What did she think would happen? Kyoka had just fallen into that same trap. She trailed off, frowning at the screen. What just happened? The students all blinked in confusion, and even All Might did a double take. They'd all watched 𝗬𝐬𝐻𝐈 bring Kaya towards the nuclear weapon, still wrapped up by the tongue, then released her, allowing Kaya to place her hand on the nuke, smirking. Tokoyami's shadow talons lowered themselves as he tilted his head in confusion. Yes, the hero team wins the second match. All Might boomed into the mic. Wait, what happened? Mina Ishido demanded as the others had similar reactions. Ha! Katsuki let out an obnoxious laugh. You were all underestimating my sister, weren't you? You're all idiots. Momo frowned, the gears in her head churning at high speeds. It looks like Bakugo managed to make Tsuyu do what she wants? Can she control minds or something of the sort? I'm not telling you bastards shit, Katsuki grumbled, crossing his arms and glaring at the class. Denki Kaminari stepped forward, ready to squash his ego and explain what she'd done to him during the entrance exam, but another person spoke before him. Demon horns, can Kaya Bakugo possess others? Todoroki glanced towards the angry twins standing at the back. Katsuki only scoffed and turned away. Possess? Momo repeated in a tone that made it seem like she thought it was a dumb idea. Kaminari took a deep breath and said, It's true. She did it to me during the entrance exam. She took control of my body and used my quirk to destroy robots and get points? What? The invisible girl screeched in shock. How does it work? I think it's when she touches someone. Then she takes over. Todoroki approached him and demanded, Are you still conscious yourself while she possesses you? Yeah, sorta. You can't do anything though. Does she remain conscious and active in her own body, or does it shut down? And does the effect stop once she doesn't touch you anymore? She fought off robots with a stick while making my body shoot high voltage to destroy other robots at the same time, so she doesn't pass out, no. Kaminari responded as he backed away from the intense look in Todoroki's mismatched eyes. And I think the touch is only required to activate her quirk, and no, I don't know how long it can last. That's a quirk that would be pretty bad, in the wrong hands, Momo said, and shot a careful glance towards Katsuki, who was still sulking. She added in a whisper, Can you imagine if he had gotten that quirk? The others remained silent, lost in thought at all the terrible things the possession quirk could allow one to do. All Might went to retrieve the students in Battle Building B, and found them all standing around quietly, an awkward tension clinging to the air. He brought them back to the adjacent building where the others were, trying to make conversation with Tokoyami as they walked. I'm sorry, Kaya whispered to 𝗬𝐬𝐻𝐈. She didn't exactly mean it, but she also didn't want her to treat her like the plague either. She knew her quirk was disturbing to others. To have someone else take control of your body was a strong invasion and breach of personal space. Most people preferred getting punched in the face. Don't apologize. It definitely shocked me and it wasn't fun, but you did it to win, Tsuyu told her with a small smile. Kaya nodded, surprised by her calm reaction. The class remained quiet as the others entered the room. Kaya felt most eyes on her, and though they were wary, she felt a strange pride. She was glad they were shocked by her quirk. Everyone else was so cool, it was satisfying to finally get some recognition. All Might cleared his throat before speaking. Now, who can tell me the person who should win MVP in that second match? It's obviously Kaya. Katsuki drawled. She's the one who made the heroes win. She waited for her opportunity and didn't waste a second of it. Who can tell me why he's wrong? All Might asked the others. Wrong? He exclaimed, his upper lip pulling up with disdain. Momo raised her hand. The pro hero nodded at her, so she said, Kaya Bakugo did win them this match. However, that mostly depended on luck and on the fact that the nature of her quirk had been unknown. If Tsuyu had been aware of what she could do, I'm certain she wouldn't have grabbed Bakugo with her tongue. Exactly. All Might boomed. 𝗔𝗂𝐁𝐵 was the MVP, as she used her fine hearing to find the room without having to fight a villain. It's an important lesson. When you have the option to avoid confrontation, avoid it. Well done. Now, the villain team did do everything correctly, and could have won in different circumstances. This just goes to show how hero work is unfair and risky, sometimes. You must all get used to it. Yes, sir, the class said all together. The other teams all had their own matches, and some of the students shined more than others. Kaya went to talk with her brother while the students were focused on the screen, watching Todoroki freeze every surface of the building and touch the nuke with no obstacle, since the villain team had their feet frozen in place. Todoroki touched the weapon with his left hand, releasing enough heat to melt all the ice covering the building and leaving scalding water in its place. Kaya hadn't known he could warm things up too, and it almost distracted her from her twin. "You okay?" she whispered to Katsuki. He growled, "Do I look it?" "No," she said with a sigh, looking him over as he slipped his shaking hands in his pockets. "Todoroki said you were really smart with your moves, and Kaminari said you were a ball of natural instinct when it came to combat. I already know all that, don't need them to realize it. And I know I'd lose against that half-and-half bastard too," he hissed, glaring at the screen. "I can't believe Deku tricked me, tricked us and everyone else in our neighborhood, that he had no quirk. The nerve of that nerd." Was all she responded, knowing there was no point in trying to comfort him. The class ended with All Might congratulating them on their first combat training. The rest of the day was spent in the classroom, learning hero-related theory. Izuku remained in the infirmary, although Ochako had rejoined the class after lunch. During a break, she noticed Kaminari speaking with Kyoka and Kirishima in hushed voices, sending occasional glances her way. Hoping to smooth things over between them, she got up and walked over to the group by the front of the class. They watched her warily. "Look, Kaminari, I'm sorry I chose to possess you during the entrance exam," she said in a quiet voice. "It could have really affected your chances of getting into UA, so I'm glad it didn't make you fail. See it as a compliment, you know? I possessed you because I thought your quirk would be useful. It's strong." Kaminari squinted at her, a grin threatening to break through his expression. "I won't fall in your trap again," he warned her, wagging a finger at her face. "So I forgive you this time." Kaya smiled, amused it hadn't taken much to correct things between them. The yellow-haired boy didn't seem like someone to hold a grudge, he was too happy-go-lucky. "Gotta admit, even if you didn't tell me anything about you, we made a pretty good team," Kyoka told her, holding out her fist. She fist-bumped her. "I did tell you something. Katsuki likes calling me a damned demon when he's pissed." "So 20 times a day?" Kirishima raised an eyebrow. "Yep." Kaya laughed, finally feeling a bit better about Class 1A as she saw the possibility of making friends, even though Katsuki was around. The rest of the afternoon flew by quickly due to her good mood. At the sound of the final bell of the day, Katsuki nearly ran out of the classroom, eager to get home. Kaya didn't even get annoyed that he didn't wait for her and let him go ahead, taking her time to pack her things back inside her school bag. She got up and went to leave, but someone stood by her desk, blocking her path. She looked up to be greeted by a pair of mismatched eyes. One was a dull gray, while the one surrounded by scar tissue was a bright turquoise. "You should know that I won't let you possess me as easily as you did our classmates," he stated, an intensely serious expression on his face. Kaya, taken aback by how close he stood, said, "Okay? If there's one thing I despise, it's someone else trying to control me," he continued. "I won't let you beat me. Especially not with that quirk." "Why does it sound like we're having an argument, but you're alone in it?" she wondered before deciding to tease him with a half-smile. "I never said anything about beating you or whatever. Maybe you're mixing us up. We Bakugo twins do look alike. I'm the useless one, not the crazy one determined to become number one. Save your speech for him?" "No. I'm not worried about him beating me. Only you," he corrected, his eyebrows furrowing over his eyes. "Never mind then. You're the crazy one," she scoffed, fixing her backpack higher onto her shoulder, anxious to get away from his scrutinizing gaze. "How so?" Todoroki wondered. "Do you see yourself as inferior to your brother?" her face twisted with annoyance as she hissed, "No." He ignored her, continuing his thoughts. "If so, you're blind. You won the combat training today." He lost his match. Kaya stared at him, his words echoing in her mind. She'd won something Katsuki hadn't. It was the first time in her entire life, she realized, now that she took a moment to think about it. "Oh, Midori is here," Kirishima exclaimed, breaking their stare down as both of them turned to look towards the door. Izuku stood in the doorway, an arm in a sling and the other bandaged up to the elbow. A group of students pounced on him, congratulating him on his fight against Katsuki, and inviting him to join them in reviewing the combat training matches. Todoroki left without another word, slipping out the door with no one else noticing, too engrossed in the hero of the day's return. Izuku noticed Kaya, then her twin's empty desk. "Kaken left already?" "Yeah," she told him with a shrug. He ran out of the classroom, determined to find his childhood bully. Kaya took her time, chatting a bit with the other students before heading out. Once outside, she noticed Katsuki by the gates having a brief talk with All Might before he continued on his way home. She ran past Izuku and the pro hero to catch up with her brother. She didn't ask him anything, letting him sulk and simply enjoying the walk home in peaceful silence. The sky turned orange with bits of pink as the sun set, covering the streets and houses in a golden light. Kaya couldn't help but smile to herself, in amazed disbelief that she'd beaten her twin at something. Indirectly, of course, but it was still more than ever before. Later in the week, Aizawa announced they would be going off campus for a rescue-related training exercise. The students changed into their costumes, though some preferred putting on their blue UA jumpsuits instead. They chatted as they waited around for the bus, and when it arrived, 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 blew into an ear-piercing whistle. "Class 1, gather around," he called out. Earlier that week, he'd been chosen as class president. Izuku had been voted for it at first, but he'd given his title to his friend, judging him better suited for the leadership role than he was. 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 took this new role very seriously, like everything else. "Form 2 lines by your student numbers in order to make boarding the bus go smoothly," he demanded, moving his arm as he always did when he spoke with authority. Like he was karate chopping onions in midair. He blew into his whistle some more. "Ah, he's so damn annoying," Katsuki grumbled as his twin nodded, rolling her eyes at the unnecessary authority. They boarded the bus, and the twins sat together on the higher platform overlooking the main part of the vehicle. The closest to them was Izuku, sitting in front of them on the lower part with 𝗬𝗎 and Ijiro Kirishima. "Kaya, I heard about your quirk from the others. I wish I would have been there to see it." Izuku gushed to her, eyes wide with awe. "Do you think you could possess many people at the same time?" "No," she snorted, ignoring her twin's annoyed huff beside her as he looked out the window. He never liked when she bothered to respond to Izuku. "I can barely possess one. But you should try." Izuku insisted with an excited grin. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "It's hard to explain, but imagine having to write an essay about quirk rights while playing a strategic video game on your computer at the exact same time." Izuku frowned as he attempted to imagine it, and grimaced once he managed to. "That's just the mental strain. Put your index fingers in front of you," she commanded. Izuku did exactly as she asked. "Now, with your right, keep drawing a circle, and with your left, draw a line and keep going side to side. No, not like that. Wiggle your finger horizontally." Izuku tried, but could barely hold it a few seconds before his circle became an oval and his line began moving up and down as well. "See? That's only your fingers. I need to do that with 2 whole bodies," Kaya explained. 3 would be impossible. Kirishima's jaw dropped as he tried the finger test and failed instantly as well. Denki Kaminari, Mina Ashido, and 𝗕𝗏𝗧𝗏 also tried as they were seated facing Izuku and the others. "Kaya, you show us," Denki urged her. She did the exercise, holding the movements perfectly for nearly 30 seconds before her fingers began slightly deviating. "Whoa, that's impressive," Mina exclaimed, shaking out her hands. "I feel dizzy from trying so hard." Kaya smiled softly, glad the others seemed more accepting of her a mere few days after finding out about her quirk. Tsuyu told Izuku that his quirk was like All Might's, and Kirishima argued that at least All Might didn't injure himself when he used his, so they weren't the same. The discussion spiraled into who had cool pro-hero resembling quirks. Well, if you're talking about flashy and strong, it's gotta be Todoroki and Katsuki Bakugo, though huh? Kirishima said, glancing towards them both as Todoroki sat behind the twins. Bakugo's always mad, so he doesn't seem like he'll be popular, though, Tsuyu remarked in her nasally voice. Kaya raised an eyebrow at her bravery. Her twin jumped to his feet, holding onto the barrier between him and the frog girl as he yelled, "What the hell? You wanna fight?" "See?" Tsuyu said, unbothered. "We haven't known each other that long, so it's amazing that everyone already knows his personality is crap steeped in sewage," Denki said with a nonchalant smirk. Kaya burst out laughing, holding her stomach as it began cramping up. The only person to ever tease Katsuki was herself, usually. Witnessing the class gang up on him like that was priceless to her. Izuku, however, seemed distraught to see his bully get bullied so carelessly. "What's with that vocabulary, you bastard? I'll kill you!" Katsuki kept shouting, the barrier the only thing keeping him from jumping on the others, although he easily could have if he'd really wanted to. He turned to glare down at his sister, towering over her. "And you, stop laughing. You should be defending me." "How could I?" "Denki's right," she said, shooting her twin a tauntingly sweet smile. Before Katsuki could yell some more, Aizawa scolded them. "We're here. Stop messing around." "Yes, sir," the class chanted in unison. The bus stopped soon after and the students filed out. Kaya was the last one to step off the small stairs and onto the street. "Kaya," Aizawa said, standing by the bus door. She looked at him questioningly. "Unfortunately, the training today won't be very efficient in training your quirk, again. Just do what you can. There won't be any consequences if you don't do well." "That's good to know," she tried smiling, though she couldn't help but feel disappointed. "I'll try my best anyway." The homeroom teacher nodded and they joined the rest of the class. They stood before another pro-hero, 13. She was tall and her astronaut costume was large. The round helmet's glass was black with 2 white eyes. "Everyone, I have been waiting for you," 13 greeted, her voice delicate and soft. "Let's go inside without delay." They entered the giant dome-shaped building, and most of the students gushed about meeting 13 or the impressive interior of the USJ building. All around the circular area were different landscapes and natural disaster simulations. In the center of it all was a fountain, which looked minuscule compared to everything else. A shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a windstorm, etc., 13 listed as she pointed out different areas. "It is a training ground that I made with different types of accidents and disasters. It's called the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short." The homeroom teacher went forward to speak with 13 in a hushed voice so students wouldn't hear. Kaya sighed as she observed the different areas. Mountains, broken buildings, an indoor lake, nothing would allow her to be useful. She couldn't possess materials and elements. Her biggest weakness was clear to her. Whenever there weren't human enemies, she might as well be quirkless. "Stick with me," Katsuki told her, patting her shoulder. "Nothing you can do here." "I know," she groaned with frustration. Her brother was more attentive to her feelings than anyone else's, but he still remained ignorant of how insensible he was most of the time. The teachers stopped their quiet discussion and turned their attentions to the students. 13 said, "Let's see, before we begin, let me say one thing, or two, or three, or 4, 5, 6, 7. Everyone, I am sure you are aware of my quirk, black hole. I can suck up anything and turn it to dust." She created a black hole beside her, the darkness swirling slowly, mesmerizing Kaya. "You've been able to use that quirk to save people from all kinds of disasters, right?" Izuku gushed, his inner fanboy jumping out. "Yes, but it is a power that can kill easily. Some of you also have quirks like that, right? In a superhuman society, personal quirks have been certified and stringently regulated, so that doesn't seem to be a problem at first glance. However, please do not forget that there are many quirks that can kill with one wrong step. With Aizawa's physical fitness test, you found out about the possibility of your own hidden powers, And with All Might's person-to-person combat training, I think you experience the dangers of using those powers against others. This class is a fresh start. You shall learn to use your quirks to save people's lives. You do not have powers so you can harm others. Kaya nudged her twin, smirking teasingly. He rolled his eyes and didn't bother to look at her, focused on the long speech. I hope you leave here with the understanding that you have powers in order to help others, 13 went on before bowing. That is all. Thank you for listening. The class erupted in applause, filled with respect for the astronaut-looking hero. I don't see how my power can save people unless there's a bad guy to take care of nearby, Kaya muttered. I didn't give you demon horns for nothing, Kai. Katsuki smirked, studying her dark costume. Aizawa stepped forward. All right then, first. The lights surrounding the dome flickered, and the fountain's flow began stuttering, instead of its previously smooth output. Kaya stared at it, head tilted, as a dark purple cloud shimmered before it, growing larger with every second. It warped into a humanoid shape with bright neon yellow eyes before returning to its circular form. The way it moved resembled 13's black hole, except it didn't suck things in. Things came out of it. Bodies. People. Aizawa had noticed as well, and called out, "Gather together and don't move. Protect the students." What's that? Kirishima pointed to the fountain. Kaya was still staring as more people hurried out of the dark purple vortex. The man who'd gotten out first walked leisurely as the others ran, taking his time like he was the one in charge. Dressed in all black, his hair was a light blue color, and most disturbing were the hands all over him. White hands seemed to hold him, tied to thick red cords behind his back. Hands held his wrists, his arms, his shoulders, as well as his head. A hand covered his entire face, but the fingers were spread apart enough so one of his red eyes remained unobstructed. She grabbed her twin by the arm, demanding his attention. Katsuki squinted at the newcomers, trying to make sense of it all. Is this like the entrance exam where the lessons already started? Kirishima wondered, holding a hand above his eyes in an attempt to see better. The fountain was very far and seemed tiny from up on the walkway. He and Izuku began taking a step forward to get a better view. Don't move, Aizawa commanded in a gruffy voice. He put on his yellow visor glasses. Those are villains. The students who hadn't caught on yet froze or gasped. Villains? There's no way they could get into a hero school, Kirishima exclaimed in disbelief. Momo looked at 13. What about the trespasser sensors? We have them, of course, but... The pro-hero faltered, having no answer for the students. Did they only appear here, or around the whole school? Todoroki asked, looking the calmest amongst the students. Either way, if the sensors aren't responding, that means they have someone with a quirk that can do that. An isolated area separated from the main campus during a time when a class is supposed to be here. They might be fools, but they're not dumb. This surprise attack was carefully planned with some sort of goal in mind. Aizawa told 13 to evacuate the students and try contacting the school, despite the villains having a radio wave-type quirk that blocked communication and sensors. Eraserhead jumped down the huge staircase and began fighting the massive crowd. He used the cloth wraps to grab people and throw them to the ground, or toss them towards other villains, rendering them unconscious. The enemies couldn't tell who he looked at because of his glasses, so they never knew whose quirk he was erasing, creating mass confusion. 13 led the students back down the long walkway towards the double doors of the exit. They all ran, leaving Eraserhead behind to buy time as he seemed to have the situation under control. Kaya, though a little overwhelmed by the events, felt impressed with her teacher. She wished she could learn to use her quirk so effectively in combat as well, and wondered if she should get a hero weapon in the likes of his wraps to aid her in close-quarter fights. Katsuki grasped her wrist as they ran to snap her out of her thoughts. Kai, you stick close to me, got it? I'll be okay, they're human. I can possess the... He abruptly stopped running, tugged her closer, and looked down at her with his furious gaze. I'm not kidding around. Stay close. Got it? Fine. Got it? She pulled her arm out of his grasp, used to his overprotective side, although for once, it was justified. Before the twins could start running again, the dark purple mass warped on the ground before them and the humanoid figure blocked their path, 15 feet tall with its neon eyes shining. I won't let you pass.